We start in line 774 with incubuit, and the subject of that verb is Dardanides here in line 775. Now Dardanides is referring to Aeneas, but it's obviously not just his name. It's a word which means a descendant of Dardanus, and Dardanus was the ancestor of the kings of Troy. So we can translate it as the Dardan, capital D-A-R-D-A-N, but it's referring to Aeneas. So the Dardan stooped, incubuit, sort of leaned over, and que. He wanted, voluit, perfect tense, he wanted to tear away, convellere, the steel, ferrum. This is referring to the sword that's stuck in the root of the tree. He wanted to tear away the steel with his hand, manu, that's ablative, with his hand. And, que, to follow, sequi. Now, sequi is the infinitive from sequor, I follow. Right? It's a deponent verb, so it looks like a passive infinitive, but it has an active meaning. And it's infinitive because it's following voluit, just like convellere was. So he wanted to tear away the steel with his hand, and he wanted to follow with his spear, tello. So tello is the ablative from, or telo, it's the ablative from telum, meaning a spear. So he wanted to follow with his spear, quem. Now quem is the masculine accusative singular of qui. So it means the man whom, the person whom. He was not able, non poterat, imperfect tense, he was not able to catch, prendere, by running, cursu. That's the ablative of cursus, which is a noun meaning running. So in other words, he wasn't able to catch Turnus on foot by running, so instead he wants to follow him with his spear, because obviously when you throw a spear, it travels faster than if you just run towards them. So that's the idea. So instead of chasing Turnus on foot, he's going to throw a spear at him. That's the idea. And then tum vero, then indeed. So tum means then, vero means indeed. And we have a new subject, which is turnus. So turnus, amens formidine. Amens means frantic or out of his mind. And then formidine is the ablative of formido. So it means with terror or from terror. So frantic with terror. And then the main verb is inquit, so Turnus said. And here we get some direct speech. He says, faunus, right? So faune is the vocative case of faunus. So he says, faunus, I pray, precor, another deponent verb. So precor, precari, precatus sum, I pray. Have pity. Right? So miserere means, it's an imperative form. It's another deponent verb. Right? Misero, I have pity on someone. So it's an imperative. Have pity. And you, tuque. And he is addressing now optima terra, literally the greatest earth. Right? Optima means it's the superlative of bonus. It means best. But we might translate it as something like most gracious or something like that. Most gracious earth. And you can see that terra here has a capital T, because this is earth in the sense of the goddess earth, whom the Greeks called Gaia, but the Romans called terra. So, and you, most gracious earth, hold the steel. Tene ferrum. So tene is the imperative, addressed to the earth, and ferrum is the steel, the sword. So he's asking the goddess of the earth to hold in the ground the sword that Aeneas is trying to pull out, basically. Or the spear, rather, the spear that Aeneas is trying to pull out. So he says, hold the steel. If, that's C, so hold the steel, if I have honoured, kolui, so this is from kolo kolere, to honour something. If I have honoured your rights, vestros honores, your rights, always, semper. Right? And the vestros is plural, so that makes it clear that he's referring to the rights of both Faunus and Terra. So basically what Turnus is saying is, look, I have always worshipped you both properly, so now please do something for me. Right? Please hold Aeneas's spear in the ground. Don't let him pull it out. Right? So he's saying, if I've always honoured your rights, but he's really saying, you know that I have done this. I have always honoured your rights. So he says, if I have always honoured your rights, which, so quos is referring back to honores, those rights which, by contrast, so contra, this isn't contra plus accusative, this is contra on its own, meaning on the other hand, or in contrast, which in contrast, the Aeneadae, the sons of Aeneas, meaning not literally his sons, but the Trojans in general, which the sons of Aeneas have made fecere, so this is a poetic form for fecerunt, have made profanos, profane or unholy, with war, bello. Right? In other words, I've always been pious, I've always worshipped you properly, but these Trojans have come over here from some other country. They've brought war to Italy, and that has now disrupted your sacred rites. Right? That's disrupted your worship. So therefore you should help me and not them. Right? That's the idea here. And then we have the end of his direct speech, and we have the word dixit, which is the perfect tense from dico, dicere, so he spoke. And, that's que. He did not call, so he non vocavit, he did not call, or in this case call upon, he didn't call upon the help, opem, that means help in the accusative case, he did not call upon or call for the help of the god, dei, genitive singular, in cassa vota. Now, cassus means vain or futile, or something like that, and vota, a votum, is a prayer. So literally, he didn't call upon the help of the god into futile or useless prayers. Right? Now, this phrase, to call someone into prayers, really means to call someone to hear something or to witness something. So the idea is he didn't call the help of the god really with useless prayers, right? Virgil could have just used the ablative plural here, cassis votis, with useless prayers, but instead of that he's gone for in plus accusative, but the meaning is basically the same. So he didn't call the help of the god in futile prayers. So what Virgil is saying here is the prayers were not a waste of time. So the gods actually did listen to Turnus's prayers. Okay, and then we go on to the next page here with namque. So nam means for, and you don't need to translate the que, you can translate namque as for. And now we have two participles, luctans, present participle, and moratus, perfect participle. And in this case, the participles have a meaning like despite. So you could translate luctans, luctare is to wrestle, but you could translate it as despite wrestling. Right? Literally it just means wrestling, but you could say despite wrestling, or even though he was wrestling for a long time, right? And despite moratus, having delayed, or you could keep it you could translate it as a present. You could say you could say delaying as well. Despite having delayed on the tough route in lento stirpe. So in here means on, and lento means tough or unyielding, right? Inflexible, and then stirpe is the ablative of the word meaning a route. So despite wrestling for a long time and delaying or having delayed on the tough route, Aeneas, he's the subject, was not able, haud valuit. So haud means not, it's like a stronger version of known, and valuit means was able to, or was strong enough to, discludere, to loosen, or to relax, the morsus, the bite. Technically it's plural, the bites, but you could translate it as singular. The bite of the tree, roboris, that's genitive, from the word robur, meaning an oak or a tree in general, of the tree, with ullis viribus, with any strength. Okay, so vires is a plural noun meaning strength, and ullus means any. So I'll just go over that phrase again. So not with any strength, viribus haud ullis, was Aeneas able, Aeneas valuit, to loosen, discludere, the bite, morsus, of the tree. So in other words, Aeneas is pulling and pulling and pulling, but he can't pull the spear out of the tree. So I think now you can see why you might translate luctans and moratus with a word like despite or even though. So in other words, Aeneas he's wrestling for ages, he's delaying on the route. In other words, he's, instead of running after Turnus, he's staying there to pull on the spear, but he just can't do it. So even though he's putting all this effort into it, he is unable to succeed. He's unable to pull the spear from the root. And then we have dum, meaning while. So while he acer, while he fiercely, nititur, okay, this is a deponent verb, just like moror, meaning to delay. Nititur means he struggles, right? So while he fiercely struggles and instat, sort of strains, right? He's putting in a lot of effort. Something else happens, which is, let's skip this line for the moment. The subject is Dea Daunia, the Daunian goddess, right? And this is Juturna, Turnus' sister. She's described as Daunian because she is, like Turnus, a child of Daunus, right? So the Daunian goddess. And now we can come back to this line. Having been changed, mutata, or having changed, so it's a feminine perfect participle, having changed into the appearance, in faciem, of the charioteer Metiscus, aurigae metisci, and rursus means again or back, so having changed again, rursus, into the appearance of the charioteer Metiscus. And then what does the Daunian goddess do? She procurrit, she runs forward, and que, she gives back, reddit, because reddere is to give back, she gives back the sword, ensem, to her brother. So fratri is dative, right? To her brother. Okay. But Venus. Now there's no word for but in this sentence, but sometimes in Latin, when you have no conjunction, the idea is that there's a contrast. So you could translate Venus as but Venus. And remember, Venus is the mother. She's the goddess of love, but she's also the mother of Aeneas. So, but Venus, indignata, that means enraged or indignant. And then this word indignata brings us into an accusative and infinitive construction, an indirect statement. So, indignant or enraged, that this, so quod means that this thing, that this action, or technically it means that which action, it's which because it's referring back to what Juturna has just done. So enraged that this was being allowed, licere, so licere means to be allowed, so enraged that this was allowed to the bold nymph, so audaci nymphae is dative, enraged that this was allowed to the bold nymph. And then what did Venus do? She accessit, she approached, and quae, she revelet, she plucked away. So velere is to pluck, and re means back or away. She plucked away the spear, telum, from the deep root, alta radice. So altus means high or deep, and radix is a root. So in other words, because Juturna has helped Turnus by giving back his sword, Venus decides to level the playing field, right, to make the situation a bit more even or equal, by pulling the spear, Aeneas' spear, out of the root. So Aeneas wasn't able to do it because he's human, but the goddess Venus does it. Okay, and this, by the way, is the last appearance in the whole poem of Venus, the mother of Aeneas. Okay, and so we then come to Olli. Now, Olli is just an old-fashioned version of illi, so it means those men, referring to Aeneas and Turnus. And then sublimes. Now, sublimes can mean, it means raised high, but probably here it's a metaphor. So raised high in spirit, or you could say elated, or something like that. In other words, they're excited, right? They're elated. So those men, elated. And also they're described as refecti, so elated and renewed. Right? Refectus means literally made again. So they're renewed or refreshed, literally with weapons and with minds. That's a slightly strange phrase, refreshed with weapons and with minds. I think the idea is, they're refreshed with weapons because the goddesses have given them back their weapons, right? Juturna has given Turnus back his own sword, and Venus has given Aeneas back the spear that was stuck in the root. So that's what that means. And then refreshed with minds, I think, means something like this has now given them more, another spurt of energy. Right? The fact they've got their weapons back has given them new optimism, new hope, new energy. So we could say something like renewed in their weapons and in their minds. Something like that. It's a hard phrase to translate, but I think that's roughly how to translate it. And then we have hic twice. So you see you've got hic at the beginning of line 7, 8, 9 and halfway through it. And so that means this one doing something, and this one doing something else. So the first hic refers to Turnus, and the second hic refers to Aeneas. So the first hic means this one, trusting in his sword, fidens gladio. Okay, so That's Turnus. He's trusting in the sword which Juturna has just given him. And then the other one, hic, so you could translate the second hic as the other. The other one is fierce, acer, and arduous. Arduous, if it's a wall, it means steep. If it's a person, it could mean something like towering, very tall or impressive, with his spear, hasta. So this one, this second hic, refers to Aeneas, who is towering high, holding his spear. And that's the one which was stuck in the tree. Right, remember, the gods Faunus and Terra helped Turnus by holding the spear in the root of the tree, but the goddess Venus has now overwhelmed them. She's pulled the spear out of the root and given it back to Aeneas. So this one trusting in his sword, the other one fierce and towering with his spear. And then we now get to the main verb. What are these guys doing? They are adsistunt. They are standing. They stand. Contra, literally against, or you could say facing. The certamina, the contests. I think in my translation I put contest, which is fine, but probably better to add the S to say contests of breathless Mars. So angeli means breathless, it's an adjective, and Martis is the god Mars. The contests of breathless Mars. And they belong to Mars because he is the god of war, right? In a sense, all wars belong to Mars. And why is Mars breathless? Well, I suppose because war is an environment where everything is very frantic and everyone's running around and breathless. So Mars is described as breathless here.